Hello and good morning. It is October 27th, and I'm glad to see you guys again. Today we will be reading out of Ezekiel 10 through 12, Psalm 83, and John chapter 4. And John chapter 4 is such a cool passage. You hear it talked about all the time. That's just because it's so cool, and is Jesus' interaction with the Samaritan woman. Now, some cultural things in case you are unaware what it means for Jesus to be talking to a Samaritan woman. Samaria was an offshoot of the Judean religion. They're the people who intermixed with the people that they didn't drive out of the promised land. And so they were looked down upon by the Jewish people. It was very common practice for them to travel miles and miles out of their way to avoid Samaria just because they didn't want to talk to the Samaritans. And so the fact that Jesus is sitting there and having a full conversation with a Samaritan woman is just weird by Jewish standards, and it would have really stuck out to them. But it's so cool for us because we see this interaction of Jesus asks this woman for water, which is another cultural weird thing to do, but she gives him the water, and he just lays out before her, is like, oh, well, here, let me tell you of all these things. And she's like, cool. That's awesome. He's like, well, go grab your husband so I can tell him. And she's like, well, I don't have one. And he goes, you're right. You've had many. And the person you are living with right now is not your husband. And he just lays all of her sins out before her and goes, despite all this, God still loves you, and you can drink the living water and taste eternity, which is so cool because it's Jesus offering her the gift of life, the gift of salvation. Despite her past, despite her sins, despite the things that she has faltered in, that she can still go to heaven and be with God and have that eternal relationship with God. It affects her so much that she goes and she tells her entire village, and her entire village comes out and they talk to Jesus, and they all believe what Jesus is talking about, not just simply because of what they said, but because they have now heard themselves. And it's just so cool to see how Jesus changed this one woman's life, and despite her past faultings and failures, she is still able to go and spread the gospel with those around her. A couple days ago, I talked about in Peter, that 2 Peter, that despite your past sins, you are still able to share the gospel. That as long as you are chasing after God, you are able to go and share the gospel with all those around you. And that is what you see here. You see the Samaritan woman who has lived a messy life, who doesn't have a good life, even in that moment, was still able to go and share the gospel with all of her people in her village. And you can do the same. So don't let your past, present sins weigh you down, or even be worried about the future ones, because God still loves you. God still wants to have that relationship with you despite your mess. He wants you to come as you are, and to then not stay as you are, but to grow and to follow him, and to let your life be radically changed by the love he has to offer you. So church, as you go out this week, don't forget that God loves you. Come as you are, but don't stay as you are, and continue to move forward in your next steps of your relationship with God and chasing after him. But church, until next time, you are sent.